Hi, it's Tracy. Welcome to my home here in Sussex, England. In today's episode, we're taking a look back at last year's Christmas decorating, room by room. We'll chat about the ideas I loved, what I'll be reusing, and how I might do things differently this season. So pop me on as you start your own decorating, and let's get into the Christmas spirit together. We'll start off with the staircase. So we're going to go up the stairs, around the galleried landing, and across the beam chandelier. Up in the garage, I keep lots of my old garlands. Now, these aren't really garlands that I would decorate with on their own, but they're great as base garlands. They're nice and thick and fluffy. And of course, the furry supervisor does like to help out as well. And this year, we're going to have the assistant, the trainee, the apprentice furry supervisor. So goodness knows what chaos is going to ensue. Decorating with a puppy is going to be interesting. Now, I've used this garland on this beam chandelier for several years, and it's always worked out really well. This year definitely will be different because I've got fresh hops on there. Well, they were fresh and now they've dried. One of my staples for decorating that I use time and time again is lelandai. Now, we're very fortunate here that we've got a 2-acre field. I never cut it apart from putting pathways through. I've also planted more lelandai, and these here had been growing fabulously well, but the canopy was just too low. We kept banging into it. So I deliberately held off cutting them back until it was time to do the Christmas decorating. 2 birds, 1 stone, get some free decoration and raise the canopy. The first tree gave me quite a good supply of long lengths, so I got those back into the house and put them on top of the beam. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, you're not putting those in water. And your staircase episode was your very first Christmas decorating episode. Yes, it is very early in the season. But what I found over the years doing this is that because this is up high, it dries back naturally and it stays looking beautiful. We'd had a tree that had to come down. It had died. Normally I'd just leave them, but this one potentially could have taken down some nearby power lines. So it broke my heart to do it, but we had to do it, and I decided I would make sure that the tree appeared all the way through the Christmas decorating. And Bertie, furry supervisor, got a fabulous posing podium. That dog just loves the camera. Now, my wonderful son-in-law came down, split up lots of the rounds, so we had some great logs. We did a great habitat pile, so the wildlife can take the benefit of it until I need to start to use the twigs and branches. And of course, we've got all these fabulous twigs, which was perfect for decorating, still is perfect for decorating. So expect to see a lot of greenery, a lot of twigs, logs, bark, natural products. I don't think I could do a scheme without using natural products. I am, however, not averse to using a bit of faux. I've got this cheap ivy that I got off Amazon some years ago, and it works great up here by winding it through the natural products. It really disguises the kind of cheap plastic look of it. Now, we'll temporarily leave the beam there. Bertie is demanding that I get on with the staircase. Now, I have used a technique on my stairs for many years. Don't know if I'm going to do it this year. Had this fabulous ribbon from Costco, 50 yards for, at the time, I think I paid about £5 for it. That was a long time ago, but their ribbon is still really good value. Now, normally I don't use a cable tie, but this garland at the time was it was like wrestling a python. It was all over the place. So I temporarily secured it into position before I started with the ribbon. Now, the technique I use is really quite simple. So if you can get hold of a relatively low-cost ribbon, great big spool of it like this, then definitely give it a go. I just wrap it around and around in between each spindle. And the reason I like doing this is twofold, really. One, it actually gives me places to attach all sorts of things without having to faff about with wires or glue or anything like that, because you can poke things in the ribbon. The other reason is that it gives a really lovely visual effect when you're on the ground looking up. Now, last year was the first year that I ever lit my staircase. I know, crazy, isn't it? I've never had lights on, so I bought some off Amazon. This was a 30-meter run. Once I'd taken them out of the pack, I did what I always do with lights, and I wound them onto a tube. It just makes life so much easier. It's so easy then to actually fix them into position and wind them back onto a tube when I'm finished. I do get asked if we have a ghost in this side of the house, because it's a very old side of the house, back to the 1700s. I don't know, I've never seen one. I wonder if you spotted one. Now, I worked the lights deep into the garland, and then I added so many things that you never saw any of the wires anyway. I went right the way around the galleried landing, down the staircase, down the post. I fed them behind under the stairs, came back up the other post, along the top, then dropped the remainder of the wire down right at the back so it couldn't be seen. And of course, they were switched on and off with a remote control. Now, I changed the colour of some old garlands. I did an episode last time which was all Christmas DIYs. So there'll be lots of times in this episode that I'll refer you back to that one if you want to go and check out any of the makeovers. Once I'd attached those, I used recycled old covered wire, which I use quite a lot. I pulled out pretty much every piece of faux greenery that I owned. I rarely use fresh on a staircase because it's such a high traffic area. I've only done it once actually, and it was when we lived in a big manor house. It was a couple of days before Christmas. It was a very special Christmas. And oh my goodness, by Boxing Day, I was wishing that I hadn't. It was a mess, just constant things drying and dropping. So it's faux all the way for me, darlings, on the stairs, mixed in with natural that's already dried. Some years ago, I bought twigs from an auction. I mean, for goodness sake, I was actually after the boxes. These were big, heavy-duty plastic boxes, and I think I got the lot for like £10 or £15. But the staff at the auction house did have a chuckle with me buying twigs. I know, but they were all sprayed up, silver and gold. I wasn't actually going to use them, and then I've been bringing them out in the decorating. Here I'm actually taking some greenery back out. It was a little bit too bright and it didn't really give that Christmassy feel. Pine cones will always feature in my decorating. Absolutely love them. Dry them in the oven, opens them out. The lighter ones are great for the uprights. You don't have to wire them in. They just kind of stick in there. And then the heavier ones I like to use at the bottom. So you get this cascading effect coming down. Don't quite know if I can do that with Bear the puppy this Christmas. What do you think? Should I risk it for a biscuit or come up with a completely different design? Let me have your thoughts in the comments below. Now, another item you will always see running through my decorating is hydrangeas, be it fresh, faux or dried. And I do like to change the colour with spray paint. pampas grass. Now, this was originally brown, tried to dye it green, turned out a beautiful brass gold. It's all detailed in that previous episode of Christmas DIYs. Walking sticks wrapped with velvet ribbon. That was a great DIY last year. I loved the effect that created. And to tie in the beam chandelier with the theme, I added some more embellishments up there. After the staircase was completed last year, we went on to front porch decorating. We started off not in the porch, but down in the field. And not just down in the field, we went down to the stream and we did something creative down there. We went down to the deck area. Now, at the time, I hadn't touched this area for several years, so it was, what shall we say, very windswept and rustic. I have subsequently done a makeover on this area, so it's now in slightly better shape. So I was using some more of the lelandai from the clippings that I'd taken from that first tree. As it's quite a way down from the house, I brought another wreath base down because I don't know where my creative juices are going to be springing up from, where the flow is going to go, so I don't want to be going backwards and forwards. I was using 22 gauge wire, which I tend to do on this bigger wreath. This is one that I've had for, gosh, many moons. And it was originally from Costco. It's a straw base wreath. And just to keep it looking half decent, I wrap ribbon around it, which I change every few years. I particularly like working with lelandai in this kind of situation because it will last a long time. Even out of water, even just with clippings, if you keep spritzing it periodically, it will live till well into the new year as a door wreath. When I'm making wreaths, and particularly big ones like this, I do like to keep hanging them up and standing back. I was happy with it at this stage, so I took it back up to the house, hung it on the garage door, and then added a few more embellishments. These are teasels, and I picked these a few years ago, and they're good to keep on decorating with. I wanted to add something that's a little bit more Christmas rather than just winter, so I added some ornaments, and I put the snow spray on at this stage because the additional items I was going to add, I didn't want covered in snow spray. I tend to use it outside. I don't tend to use it too much indoors these days. I always think, why would I be using it indoors? Because if something looks frosty indoors, then does that mean your heating's not working? It just doesn't seem quite natural to me, says the woman who fills a house with half a forest every year. Now it was time to decorate the front of the porch. I always like to create a statement here because it's the first thing you see as you approach. We headed down to my storage sheds, Shed City, the shed that just keeps on giving. I love coming down here. I love shopping my shed. A few things had caught my eye. There was this old metal tub bin and it was watertight. There was also these old boxes. Now I've got 6 of these. I used them for years in the house. Then I fell out of love with them, put them away, and they've just lived in storage ever since. So this was the Christmas when all 6 came out. It was back down to the deceased tree area. We will be back down here a lot in this episode. And I was choosing a big round. Now, it weighed an absolute ton, and it was a day when there were no menfolk on the property. So I was left to do all the humping and lumping about myself. Keeps me fit. This was the last of the leylandii that I'd cut from the first tree. So once I'd attached that with a cable tie, it was back down to the field to cut some more. Now, if you'd like to try this and you don't have this kind of material to hand, then ask around your family, your friends, your neighbours, even local tree surgeons, gardeners. Ask if you can pop along and pick up their clippings. I'm sure they'll be more than happy for you to do that. When the tree surgeons were taking this tree down, I asked them to set aside some whole branches because I had an idea that I wanted to use them. And I just love the beautiful shape, the way it just bent over. It was going to be perfect for this side of the porch. And of course, it was really dry, so it was so light to work with, unlike those really big, heavy rounds. I took some of the smaller twigs and I poked them in on the other side, and it just created that continuity of it coming up, across and down. And of course, cable ties, we don't want to see those, do we? So they got wrapped in the coir bean string that you see me decorate with so many times. I love this product and I will link it for you below, along with as many products as I possibly can. They'll all be linked down below, so please do check out the description box. Then it was time to add the lights, and I've never been one for being shy for adding lights, so 2,000 were going on. I stretched them out in order to find the centre point, and then I wanted to keep some back in order to decorate the inside. So I marked that off with tape and I measured. This is the way I measure when I'm outside, just doing a big span. So I did an equal amount on both sides. Once I got the lights on, stood back, done the old eye squint, to see if you've got all the fairy lights balanced well, I could see that we needed some embellishment. So it was time to head, not to the storage shed this time, but to the garage and pull out a few decorations. Now, I used to use these in the house. I think they're quite easily available in just general shops, but I don't use them in the house anymore. And I thought, that might be quite nice. I've got a bigger one, I've got a smaller one. And if you've been with me for a while, you know that I don't do things by halves. So, of course, the bigger one went on. Bertie, ever the designer, wanted me to add these stars. I had these from HomeSense many years ago, left them outside to rust down because they were bright silver. But I had an idea that I wanted to use them somewhere else. So we needed to come up with another idea, and it was the pine cone clusters. If you would like to see how I made these, please do check out the previous episode. to the box or the trunk. I can never work out what it should be called. Anyway, we'll just call it a box. I decided that I would use a nice collection of evergreens. We've got all sorts of things growing here, so we went out for a little bit of a clipping session. Another element I introduced last year was bark because there was so much of it from the deceased tree and it was a lovely material to work with. I've kept it through the year and I think I will definitely be bringing it out again this year. Now, I'm often asked, particularly at this time of year, how long these clippings last for. So I can report back what happened with the porch. The big Leylandii clippings that were in water at the front, I actually didn't take those down until the following spring. So I got well over 4 months. I just kept refreshing the water by popping a hose pipe in and, just filling up and letting it overflow. And they lasted amazingly well. The wreath on the door was still really good into the new year. And the clippings that I've put into the box there, those again were really good into the new year. So I got maybe 2-3 months out of those. The first ones to go were the ivy that I'm adding now. And I probably got about 4-6 weeks out of those. For this side of the dresser, I kept it very simple, just using bark and a few different shaped pine cones. Decorating doesn't have to be massive and elaborate. If you don't really feel the urge to decorate this year, or maybe health doesn't permit, maybe you haven't got the space, just bring out a few fairy lights, put a few natural elements around, a few pine cones, maybe a few twigs from the garden, light a few candles. You'd be amazed how you can change the atmosphere and make it feel really quite magical. I often have this vintage mirror in the porch, but on this occasion, I'd come up with another idea. So I took it out of the way. You will see it pop up again later. And I added another of the potato chitting trays that I use time and time again all over the property. I was trying to bring it up to the level of the brick wall because I wanted to pop this board on. It was part of a job lot that I got from auction and we modified them and used them in the cottage to create shelving. Now, it wasn't quite level at the bottom, so the way to get around that was just to slide a little offcut of wood in and bish bash bosh, there we go, nice level board. I've got 5 sledges. I've got a blue one that I kind of come in and out of love with. And then I was bidding on one at auction and it turned out there was 4. So I have now acquired 5 vintage sledges. 4 of which I used throughout the decorating last Christmas, so we'll be popping back to this little selection. But for now, let's concentrate on this one. Before we do any decorating on it, I just want to scoot along to show you what I did at this end. Now, I've got this umbrella stand that just keeps on living. It just never completely dies on me. The bottom's gone. I shoved a bucket in the bottom there and it's rusting away, but it keeps on doing its job. And my cane habit that I have, where I collect walking sticks, they all lived there through the Christmas decorating, aside from the ones that we used on the staircase and a few more that will pop up later. Back down to the deceased tree for yet another round. And yes, I took a tape measure with me because I only wanted to be lifting once. Oh, and if you're wondering where the furry supervisor is whilst I'm struggling away, yeah, he's deep in contemplation. Now, to go on top of that round, I chose one of my 5 trees. I bought 10 of these some years ago, tiny diddy little things for just a couple of pounds each. And each year I keep potting them on, they keep on growing and keep on getting bigger. So they live outside all year round until Christmas, and then I bring them into the house and I decorate them. I keep them watered, and come January, they come back out again. And what's happened to the other 5, you may well ask? Well, 2 of them are happily potted up outside and in pots that are too big to move. And I'm afraid 3 of them I've killed, generally by not watering them. Now, with this one, I didn't want to see the black plastic pot because that's not very aesthetically pleasing. So I wrestled it into a sack. I've got quite a selection of sacks. Also, old bits of hessian, which I find really useful in decorating, and you'll see me use that a little bit later. Now, this one wasn't looking too healthy, so I decided I'd bling it up somewhat with a few clippings. Back over to that sledge, and to decorate it, I am going to make a swag. Once I've layered up my clippings, I tend to remove the top few inches just so I can get a cable tie in there and create a really tight fixing. I kept this one really quite simple and just finished it off with ribbon. Now, I absolutely love this ribbon that I found on Amazon last year. It was super value and it's got velvet on both sides. And I loved it so much, I bought it in 2 different gold colours. Golf ball garland. I did a lot of decorating with golf balls last Christmas, and if you want to see all the different creations that I made, go check the last episode. There's a lot of fun DIYs in there. I like to repeat materials. I think it creates a cohesive look. It links spaces together. Now, in this space is our doorbell. This is where it lives. And this is our doorbell. This old captain's bell. It's not actually that old. It came from HomeSense. It was very shiny silver when I got it. It had a black handle. It wasn't really working for me anymore. So I changed the appearance by using 3 different colours of rub and buff. And last year, it just needed a little bit of a refresh. So I went over it again with 3 different ones, and then I used black wax and I used dark wax. Before I added the lights, I just needed to do another few little finishing touches. If you're enjoying this marathon so far, then please do hit that thumbs up button. And if you can see the hype button, it should be there for the first 7 days of the video first playing. Then if you're really enjoying it, please hit the hype button as well. It just helps the channel. You get 3 hypes to use each week, which you need to save for your favourite creators, your favourite channels. And I really hope I'm one of them. Bless you. Thank you. Once the porch was finished, it was time to go back into the house, into the hallway, and bring some festive cheer into this space. Hallways can often get overlooked in decorating, but I treat it like I would any other room. Back down to our trees, so we're 2 down. Time to start trimming back the 3rd one. And, of course, another visit to our deceased tree. I like to put all my clippings on an old sheet because it contains all the mess. It also makes it much easier to manoeuvre along the room just by dragging the sheet. I do like to cook my bark, so I leave bark in the warming oven overnight, and that ensures that it's nice and dry for decorating, and it also kills off any unwanted creepy crawlies. I ran metallics through all of the decorating last year, so the hydrangea heads here have been sprayed with a copper spray. The colour scheme was very much greens and metallics, lots of copper, gold, brass, and oodles and doodles of natural products. A simple pot filled with twisted willow that grows in the field, and to it I added rusty acorns. The metallic balls are golf balls. All the details again in the DIY video that I did last episode. Now we have a socket quite close to the windowsill, so I went with my copper lighting. I love using the copper wire, and of course the museum wax is always in my decorator's arsenal. So good just to drop a little spot there and it stops those wires just tumbling off. A little finishing touch here, a gold sprayed acorn and the double-sided velvet ribbon. Now, these are the 4 ribbons that I used last year, and both the gold ribbons are linked below, along with the green velvet. They're all available on Amazon. Now, another little makeover for you. I found this Alibaba bin in a charity shop for just £5. It was in great condition. The colour was just a little bit yellowy orange for me. So I did a wash on it. Now, rather than mixing up a wash of Annie Sloan Cocoa, and it can get a bit messy, when you're going 50-50 paint and water, I did a little bit of paint on my brush, and then I took a bottle of water with a spray on it there, and then go over and just keep working it in lots of different directions until you get the colour intensity that suits you. You can add more paint, you can add more water. It was quite a chilly day, so rather than get a hairdryer out, I just used a heat gun, dried off super quick. Great to start decorating with. Little bit too floppy for me. I wanted something more upright. So I joined a few cable ties together and just nipped those in, pulled the foliage around them, and that way you couldn't really see them, so I didn't need to add anything else to it. It actually turned out really sturdy. Now, this was the first time I used waterfall lights. I bought, I think it was 5 sets of these last year. Absolutely loved them and will most definitely be using them again this year. I used them upside down here. So again, a little bit of museum wax, put the connector into the top of the basket, and then rather than have them cascading down, I fed them up. All 20 strands. I think Bertie approved. For the top, you may have noticed there, I've wired it to the handle like a jaunty little hat. Inside, the branches were just on a funny angle, so I wedged a piece of wood in there, and all Christmas long, they stayed bolt upright. Moving across to the other side of the hallway, we have this pot here. I bought it from HomeSense, fell out of love with the finish and did my faux stone effect on it. Now, remember the garlands that we hung in the stairwell? Well, there were 5 of them. I only used 4. So this one, I'm going to use it in a slightly different way. Onto the mantel above the wood burner now. Now, we don't use the wood burner that often, so I was happy to put some fresh clippings on there. I used a little bit of museum wax just on the end, just to get a little bit of a fixing, because I didn't use any wires or command strips or anything like that. I just layered everything up using the mirrors as a support. I like to leave negative spaces, not to have everything symmetrical. So I just finished that end off with some of the dark gold ribbon. Over to my big old French sideboard. I absolutely just love this piece. I also was quite happy with the way that it was arranged on the top, so I kept it super simple. Bertie was giving his wag of approval, so we were definitely doing well. We moved over then to the next sideboard in the hallway and to the big pot here. Now, I like to do big. I mean, like really up to the ceiling big. And this was no exception. But then I always say, if you're going to have one, you might as well have a big one. I did check the vase beforehand to make sure it was watertight, although I was still a little bit worried. Huge bauble is really quite heavy. I found it in a charity shop for just £3, so I added a little bit of museum wax underneath it to stop it from rolling off. Onto the workbench that lives under the stairs. This is in the same position as it was when we first brought it home one Christmas Eve, and it's never changed the position since. We just love it there. It's the perfect size. Added a round that we'd cut from the disease tree and also some more of the bark. The copper bowl is actually a milk churn lid that I found in a charity shop, and the antler is a Bertie find. Now, these candles are amazing. I think this is my third year with them. These are the best faux candles I've ever had, and I will link them below. They are definitely worth the investment. The moss balls are actually made from golf balls, and all those details are in the previous episode, along with the details of how I recycled old baubles into these. Sometimes things just catch my eye and they're not quite right, and I knew this just needed a little something extra. Faux candle and a brass candlestick. Into the sitting room and over to the windowsill. Now, I didn't use any fresh on the windowsill purely for the fact that we've got a very big heat source beneath it. That big old cast iron radiator chucks out so much heat. So it was a mixture of faux and dried. I used a couple of my Hobby Lobby garlands that I got from America, and this one was from Home Sense. And then the copper cluster lights, I let them drape down either side to give a cascading effect. My favourite faux candles come with a remote control. In the big ingle nook, I tend not to put a huge amount of decoration in because it's very much a working fireplace. We use it every single day throughout the winter. Maybe this year I will do a little bit more to it because that was not a very good offering there, was it? Now, time for another sledge. And another tree. Now, because this one was going into the sitting room, I was going to have to water it. I really did not want a hot mess everywhere. So I put it into a black bin liner, and then this mesh that I'd bought at Costco years ago, completely forgot about it, and then started using it. I think it was not last year, it was the year before. And it's great. I think it might well come back out again this year. More waterfall lights. These are brilliant. I will link them below. They're only 5 watts, so they're so cheap to run and really effective. I popped my gloves on and started working them into the plant, but actually I preferred them just dangling. These lights were originally silver, and I just used a little bit of rub and buff on them, which Bertie approved of, just to make them coordinate a little bit more with the scheme. The deal was a Christmas DIY last year, and it's in last episode. I finished it off with dark wax just to change the appearance, and then used a little bit of museum wax on the bottom just to keep it steady on the books. Coffee table styling now. This is a straw wreath, and I glued lots and lots of the bark that came off the deceased tree to it and then filled in the gaps with moss. It's a Christmas DIY that I did last year, and all the details are in the last episode. Back outside now, never mind that nice cosy fireplace, and out onto my veranda, or porch as you might call it. I love decorating this place for all the seasons because we use it all year round. Now, this rug I have had for several years. It was an Amazon find and it's still down there today. It has worn so well. Now, we started off in these corners. I had these pots out and I had planned on using them. They were weighted down with stones off the drive in old Christmas containers from the chocolates. But I had a change of heart and I decided that the 3 trees that we had remaining were going to come onto the veranda. It's quite physical work doing all this decorating, you know. It's not just a load of fluff. It does keep your muscles toned. Now, I wanted to hide the black plastic pots and, of course, sacks were perfect. Ta-da! To finish them off, I just added a little bit of ribbon that I'd used on the staircase. That way it keeps that continuity going. Onto the sofa and onto the sofa installation that I've done for the last couple of years. Back down to the trees to get some materials and to get that canopy raised. Now, on this 4th tree, there wasn't a huge amount that came off. So we needed to move on to the 5th one. And then that's it. All my Leylandii there had their raised canopy and I had lots of lovely material for decorating. These eventually will grow as big as their neighbours. And while I was down in the field, I picked up a few more supplies. Remember the rusting stars from earlier? Well, I decided that I wanted to use them out on the veranda and I thought one of them at the back of the chair would be great. And then a couple of these stars, the wooden stars, I think I'd picked those up at the range some years ago, along with some old lights. Now, my lights are a bit like my fabrics. They go through different stages. So these have now been downgraded to being used outside. I don't really want them in my decoration indoors. And it's the same with my fabrics. They kind of go through the system in the house and then they get downgraded to the verandas. As we were outside, the snow spray came out. That gave a lovely frosting finish, but Bertie was none too happy. He got the real hump with me. He loves sitting on sofas and he wanted cushions on there, not a sofa installation. Onto the coffee table, and the first thing I put down was just an offcut of a scaffold board, and then I added another one of my Christmas DIYs, and these are tin cans that have got bark glued to them with little bits of moss filled with clippings in water. And yes, I did get the tape measure out to measure that it was in exactly the central position. Now, the sofa may not have cushions on, but the 2 chairs will. I do like to sit out here all the way throughout the year, and particularly in the winter months. You know, it's lovely with a appropriate drink for the time of day and cuddle up in a blanket. The throws I've had for so many years, they started life in the house. I fell out of love with them. They came and lived in the outdoor spaces, and they'll live out here until their demise. Poor Bertie, he was having to slum it in a chair rather than spreading out on the sofa. I thought I'd done enough to appease him, but he still had the hump with me. He was really miffed off. Behind the chair, I put an old laundry bin that I'd been using as a fire basket, and I wanted to put another one of those trees in, but it was slightly too low. So again, the old Christmas chocolate boxes came out. These I've used time and time again. I've still got them, and I still keep on using them. As the old saying goes, waste not, want not. The waterfall lights came out again. And just a quick tip with these, when you look down at the bottom, they always have one strand that just wraps around. So look out for that if you buy any when you're first unpacking them. Makes life a lot easier if you just unwind that one strand first. It was on to the table next, and it was a makeover. Again, that's detailed in the previous episode. I took two disparate items and showed you how I could make them work together. And I do think these are going to be coming back out again this year, only maybe with a slightly different twist to them. Of course, the museum wax is always by my side, particularly when I'm working with candles, because it helps to keep them straight upright. These potato chitting trays were such a great buy. I use them time and time again, and they're great for creating elevation, so almost like a little sideboard here. And on top of that, I brought out another one of the very old, what were we calling them? Baskets, boxes, trunks. You know what I mean. This one really was in bad condition. But again, waste not, want not. I knew I could do something with that. Over in this corner, I had a cunning plan. Now, some time ago at auction, I picked up this copper bin with a lid, brilliantly watertight, and it was very shiny when I bought it. And I decided, actually, I was going to try and make it super shiny again. So I pulled out a skanky lemon from the back of the fridge, the only bit of salt I could find in the cupboard. You can just use any salt. You don't have to use expensive salt. I cut the lemon in half, and I absolutely love this technique because the lemon acts as the scourer. You pop some salt on it and then start working it in and watch the magic happen. I was ready to style with it a few days later, and already oxidization had started to happen. But I don't mind that. I love the patina that's created. So varied, so interesting. Now, I filled this up with lots of water, and I kept on topping it up because I used some great big stems in here, some really big chunky stuff. And I'm happy to report that this lasted for months. In fact, it was only when I came to the springtime decorating that I took it all away. There was a piece of laurel at the front that was really catching my eye. It was just in the wrong position, but it was so wedged in. So the easiest way of getting rid of it was just to take the loppers to it. The star is the baby brother of the one that we used on the front porch. At this point, I wasn't 100% certain what I was doing in this whole area, actually. I think when you're working with nature, you've really just got to get started. Have a rough idea, but, it has a will of its own, and you've kind of got to go with the flow. Again, I use my old trick of repeating materials. So this gives a tie back to the other end of the veranda where I'd used similar stars. Back over to the tatty old box. And again, another thing I do a lot of is using up old packing materials. So always save them. Have a few bags around that you just keep stuffing them in because they're great to create that elevation, that height, which means that you never have to use too much product to create a really full effect. The walking sticks were very much a theme last year, and they made it out onto the veranda as well. I always try to disguise sockets wherever possible. So I used an old port box here, and on top of that, I added a printer's tray. Now, I use this time and time again. I use it all over the house. Love the height of it. It's a really practical piece of decor, and it came from auction. It was in a job lot. Didn't really have to do anything apart from give it a good clean. Probably one of my most used items. To go in this spot, I needed to choose something the right size, and ta-da, another sledge. It was a perfect size for that spot, but just a little bit boring on its own. So I decided I'd make another swag, but I would add a little bit of variety to it this time. The vintage ice skates are really quite heavy, so I ended up using quite a few cable ties just to make sure everything's secure. And I always find the easiest way when you're doing something like this is do it on the flat and then lift it into position. A little bit of the ribbon, again linking back to areas that we've already used it, just finished that top off. So I was happy with that, and then it was moving across to the bright green bookcase. This was painted in Capability Green. I've since painted it a dark olive, but it was quite a challenge to make that work for Christmas. I'll let you be the judge as to whether or not I achieved that. Another golf ball DIY. This was my golf ball cluster. I made a couple of these. Again, if you've not seen it, it's in the episode before. few more finishing touches were needed just to finish this end of the veranda off. I was really quite pleased with the way all that came together because I didn't really have a plan. I was making it up on the hoof. It did need lights, and 2,000 lights went on because you can't have Christmas without twinkly lights. And the final thing needed was some snow spray because we rarely get snow. Come mid-November, I go hunting for real Christmas trees. Now, I used to buy a lot from plantations, but over the last few years, I've been buying from this garden centre. They really seem to have high-quality trees, and the manager has the patience of a saint with me. He pulls out tree after tree and stands there. I also love it because they don't use the plastic netting, they use a cotton one. I also like to prep the trees at the back of my Land Rover. I've just found it saves my back over the years. These tree stands I have had for a long time. You can see they look very old, but they keep doing the job. They've got reservoirs, so I can keep the trees nice and watered. Of course, the baskets came out because, again, that was a bit of a theme last year. We ended up using all 6 of them, and the stands fitted in there perfectly. So what I needed to do was measure where I needed to cut those branches off so I could minimize the hassle of actually getting those trees in there. I found WD-40, quick squirt of that on a saw. It just brings it back to life and it goes through the ends like a hot knife through butter. I take off a couple of inches and then drill some holes in, and that really seems to help the tree suck the water up. And of course, the clippings will be used in the decorations. One last bit of prep I always like to do before they come out of the car is offer up the tree stand, because invariably a little bit more needs to come off, and it's far easier to do it from the back of the car. Then it's into the house. They always go in 2 rooms, one into the snug, one into the kitchen. And here is the first one in the snug. Now, I've got to be absolutely honest with you here. It was a total mare getting that into the basket, and I will not be doing that again this year. There was a lot of effing and jeffing going on. Anyway, we got there in the end. And the first thing I do is put my tree topper on. I know that could be a bit controversial, but it works for me. And of course here, the spike was too big, so the loppers had to come out, and we got there in the end. I do keep thinking, would it be easier with a faux tree? I mean, it's a real wrestling match with these big ones because I don't go small. Now, the lights, I like to bring lights in and out. So working right the way along the branches to the depth of the tree, right into that trunk, rather than lassoing or draping up and down. In the spot here, it was a choice, which sledge, and we went with that one. I really can't get my head around that blue one anymore. Maybe this year will be the year. I don't tend to put decorations on the tree in the snug. I keep it as a naked tree and just make sure I've got a few thousand lights on it. Before we did any more decorating in the snug, we went down to the kitchen and did exactly the same thing again with the same level of cursing and effing and jeffing. If I did use these boxes again like this, I would take the bases out. That was the thing that was causing the problem. Fortunately, the height was absolutely fine in here because we've got a 10-foot ceiling. And so there was enough room to get my topper on. The tree in the kitchen does get decorated, and last year I was following along on the green and metallics theme, and I'd picked up these big baubles. They were just $3.99 from Home Bargains, and I hadn't used them up until this point. I'd bought them thinking I was going to do a makeover on them, and then I thought, actually, they might look quite good deep in the tree. So I snipped off the little gold hangers and popped some wire on, and then it was much easier to fix them into the exact position that I wanted, and they really ramped up the sparkle in there. The next thing I brought out were the hydrangeas. So last year I sprayed them all in this amazing copper by Rust-Oleum. I just love this spray. They do a great gold one as well. This year I'm going to go with a burgundy colour. And rather than going out and buying lots of new decorations, I'm just going to transform what I've already got. All these hydrangea heads actually went to make my autumn wreath for this year. Golf balls, golf ball baubles. Yep, that's all part of that Christmas DIY that I did. And a lot of the metallics will come back out again this year, along with wooden items. These were lace bobbins that I found at an antiques fair, and I just wired them up, and I love them on the tree. I also added last year some of the decorations that I'd made the previous year from old baubles. I had also made some lovely crystal decorations from an old light fitting. I've been collecting lots of these this year, so expect to see some little makeovers coming very soon. So when I was happy with the decorations on the tree, I looked down and realised, actually, that looks a bit pants in that box. I needed to come up with an idea to disguise it all. And this is what I did. I rounded up lots of old boxes along with some plain brown paper. I added the gold ribbon that we'd been using, and that kept the continuity going, along with some clippings from the garden. Once I was happy that the tree was sorted, I went back into the snug and carried on the decorating there. As a Christmas DIY, I'd made a huge garland for the mantel from a horse lead rope. And if you haven't seen that DIY yet, you know where you need to go to see it. At the far end of the mantel, I added more of my favourite ever faux candles, and of course I used museum wax with those as well. And then it was time just to add a few embellishments, which included some new lights that I bought last year. Now these worked really well, so I will definitely be reusing those in my decorating this year. was getting into a right old tiz last year with so many of these little remote controls, not knowing which one was for which. So this year I have written on each one with a Sharpie exactly what they do. Now, to keep that fresh garland going, every few days I gave it a spritz with water. Once I was happy with the mantel, we moved over to the coffee table. Love a bit of coffee table styling. And I do like to use a mirror on a coffee table. This is an old one, an old gold frame one. I added one of Bertie's finds and a few brass candlesticks, a few baubles that I'd had for years, picked up at Home Sense, and of course, some candles. Over to the other side of the coffee table, and we popped outside to do a little bit of a DIY. This is an old bowl. It was in a job lot at auction. I wasn't too certain about it to start with the gold on it, and I was going to change the colour, but I'm so glad I didn't because it works perfectly at Christmas. I took some old foam, just reusing it, and a bread knife, because we always have a bread knife in the garage. That's quite normal, isn't it? I popped some strips of Gorilla Tape into the bottom of the bowl to protect it, and then used the bread knife in order to cut my recycled foam into the sizes that I needed, and I glued them to the tape, which means that when Christmas is over and this whole decoration is needing to come apart, you can literally just lift off that tape and your bowl is absolutely fine. So have a hunt in the back of your cupboards for all those big bowls that you never really know what to do with and you don't use. Do this. You can enjoy them and they're perfectly protected. Now, I left a gap in the middle because I wanted to add some decoration. But before I did that, I gave that foam a jolly good watering.
I'm going to say Christmas Eve is coming soon. Now are you, dear old man? Whisper what you bring to me. Tell me if you can. When the clock is striking 12, when I'm fast asleep.
So some very simple coffee table styling for you there, hopefully giving you some ideas. Let's move over to another part of the Snug and again, keep it simple.
Down the chimney, broad and black, with your pack, your queen. All the stockings you will find hanging in a row. Mine will be the shortest one. You'll be sure to know.
Over to the sideboard now and to the mirror where I made a swag from a coat hanger. So this is a wooden coat hanger that I have tied on some fresh greenery. Yeah, Bertie thinks I'm bonkers, but you know, what's new? It's a super simple DIY that you can adapt to really suit your style. Now, the jug here is not watertight, so a trick I often use is I take a garland and I wrap it around and around itself, almost like a bird's nest. And then when you sit it on top of your pot, you can decorate in whatever way you fancy. An alternative to a bow is a tie.
Storybook, one she hasn't read.
And keeping with the theme, more copper lights came out, and I will be repeating these lights all the way through this year's decorating. Love them.
Now I think I'll leave to you what to give a rest. Choose for me, dear Santa Claus.
One thing I won't be able to repeat this year are putting these candlesticks either side of the dresser because one of them, unfortunately, I've broken. Oh, I've got it sat in pieces whilst I'm thinking, can I make it into something else? One thing I will repeat, though, is doing those bows and having these long, luxuriating tails. I had a tiny little bit of ribbon left on the roll, so again, waste not, want not. We gave the chap here a little bit of a tie. Now on to my absolute favourite room of all time to decorate. I love doing this space. It's probably because the ceilings are 10 foot high, so I've got great height to work with. And also it's about 600 square foot, so lots and lots of scope. So the tree is sorted, but we need to go and get supplies. So off to the field we went, which is always my favourite shopping trip. Again, it's a big sheet on the ground. I have learnt my lesson over the years. Cover your space. It just keeps the clearing up so much easier. The first area we worked on was the big old pine dresser. This came from my previous house. The items up on the top there all came from HomeSense, including that huge twig wreath. I'm often asked if there's a tutorial on how I made that. Oh gosh, I wish I did. It's fabulous. I'd make so many of them. In fact, I love them so much. I actually bought 5. As I was doing this, I didn't use any fixings. I didn't use any command strips or anything like that. I literally just wedged things in and around all the items up there because they're so heavy. They could take the weight of what I was adding. This year, it's going to be very different because none of that is there now. What we have there is another of the hop binds. I popped them up in the late August as fresh hops, and now they've dried back. So it'd be interesting to see how I decide to turn them into Christmas. Actually, I haven't got a clue at the moment, so it really will be interesting to see. My man here needed a bit of ribbon, so this time we went with the green. And again, lovely long tails. Don't skimp on your tails. More golf ball decorations. You know the drill now, don't you? If you haven't seen me do it, you know where to go. And of course, some more museum wax. To bring in a pop of green here, I brought in some of my vintage books. I normally decorate quite a lot with the vintage books, and I'd found last year there wasn't a huge amount out. So in preparation for this year, I'm going to have a good rummage through my stash and see what I can find. To add to the pine cones here, I had a really good trawl through my old baubles and discovered these. I remember doing a lime green and orange tree one year, and these baubles hadn't seen the light of day for years. I added another ribbon, and again, I let my tails trail. Enjoy the piece, Bertie, because this year you're going to have the apprentice bear helping. Now, over to the white dresser that sits behind the Christmas tree. I added just copper lights and the magical effect it creates because we've got all that vintage glass in the background. And all I did in the jug was pop a hydrangea head in. Nothing more elaborate than that. I went out to collect some more clippings because there were some other arrangements that I wanted to do. I also picked up some chicken wire and some more of the hydrangea heads. But before we started those, we went on to decorate the sink island. Now, we do spend a lot of time at our sinks, so I always think, why don't we decorate around them? We want something pleasant to look at. I brought my brass scales. These were an auction find back into the kitchen. They've been used out in the cottage. They went back out after Christmas. And then for my autumn styling this year, I've brought them back in. So things do keep coming in and out and changing places. I found this little oak tray for just £5 in a charity shop. And as I'd had some dark wood in that area, I thought it would be lovely to sit behind the taps there and maybe even pop a few chocolates in it. Then we moved on to countertops and we started off with the big mirror behind the coffee station. Again, the waterfall lights came out and the museum wax. And this is how it all turned out. Love this effect, and I think I will definitely be doing this again this year. Lights in front of a mirror always give you double the twinkle. Then we worked all the way along the countertops and we started off in the corner with this big pot. This was originally a HomeSense find that I lightened with my faux stone effect. There's lots of videos on that technique if you are interested. I love to recycle, reuse, as you know if you've been with me for a while. So the branches here were from another arrangement that I'd done that year in my autumnal displays, along with the chicken wire. And of course, the Hessian just keeps coming out again and again. I like to store my little glass baubles on a skewer and it stops them getting all tangled up. When I'm decorating, I do like to keep moving around an area and get all my big pieces in. I always liken it to painting a picture. You're putting in your big, broad brushstrokes before you start coming in with the fine detail. This is my longest string of copper cluster lights, and I always tend to use it in this position. I love to run it all the way along the countertops, weaving it through the chopping boards, and then leaving a nice little bundle at the end there, ready for me to do some more decorating. And here is the last box. So that's all 6 boxes used in Christmas 2024 decorating. I had run out at this stage of the chocolate containers, so I added some old bowls. Now, I normally have a wreath at the top of that long mirror, but this year I decided I would go with a very, very long-tailed bow. Oh, I just love these long tails and letting them luxuriate. And again, a little piece left on the roll. Let's waste not, want not. The next day, I had woken up to one of the most beautiful sunrises. We get some absolute corkers here. This is very much my happy place. Down here, first thing on a morning, cup of coffee in hand, in my pajamas, and now with both of the dogs. It was also a beautiful morning in the kitchen, and overnight I had a little rethink. I'd added some copper lights onto the big wooden dresser, and as I just spread those on the surface, I decided to pull the tails of the ribbon down. Now, island dressing, my beautiful big wooden island. Remember the mirror that I took out of the porch earlier? Well, I decided that I would use it on the island. Beautiful reflective surface. I'd been to the auctions and I had scored rather well. I got these beautiful 3 copper Victorian jugs. And again, following on with the theme, they were perfect. But I felt as though I could do a little bit more than that. So I cut some oriental spruce. I'm going to use quite a lot of that this year because the tree needs to be lifted up off the ground. There's way too much of it on the ground. So we are going to be cutting that, and I'm going to have that in water and bring that into the decorating. These amazing copper lights where I managed to hide the battery compartment underneath. Just finished the whole arrangement off. Super simple. We're going to finish off this Christmas marathon with a Christmas tablescape. And when I'm decorating, I always pull the chairs back first. I have a huge amount of this white muslin. We bought it for my daughter's wedding, and it was to run all the way down the centre of the tables. She was in a big build straight after the wedding, so it all came back to me, and I've had it ever since. To make it work with the scheme last year, I took some of it and used my Dylon pods, the olive green. I love using these because they're so simple. They just go straight into the washing machine, and it dyed beautifully. I also dyed a towel because I didn't have a Christmas towel, and also some napkins. If you've not tried the Dylon pods before, I would really recommend them. I dyed slightly more than I actually needed because I had a cunning plan for the surplus. On top of my new green runner, I placed an offcut of glass, and to make sure it's absolutely in the centre, I'd already measured out the centre point and popped a little dot there, which I was able to line up with the centre of the table. Now, decorations. I pulled out my 5 glass decanters. These normally live on the big white dresser because they look lovely being reflected against the vintage mirror. So I'm using the same principle here on the table. Took the stoppers out and used them almost like crystal ornaments on the glass. Next came in the brass candlesticks. Now, I picked these up from all over the place. I've got quite an eclectic collection. I absolutely love them. Obviously, the museum wax came out to help me with the candles. Now, some of the decanters had quite a wide neck, but I had a cunning plan. A few of the brass candlesticks had these inserts inside them, so I just took those out and popped them into the decanters. If you saw the full version of my kitchen Christmas decorating last year, you will know that I scored massively on red transferware at auction, and it wasn't my first rodeo. This vintage burley-ware I had scored a few years before, so I decided I would mix the two. I absolutely love ironstone, and this is all genuine English ironstone. And who says you've got to have long stem crystal glasses on your Christmas table? I say mix it up and do your own vibe. I wanted to put some glassware on, and I had a big collection of these, what I assume are dessert bowls that I'd picked up in an auction lot. So I decided to rebrand them. No longer the humble dessert bowl. These were champagne saucers, champagne coupes. And they went down a storm. Everybody loved them. The napkins that I'd put through the washing machine with the Dylon pod, they turned out really interestingly. They were originally blue and red, and I'd bought them when I was down in Cornwall, knowing that I could dye them because they were 100% cotton. And I kept the napkin creation very simple. Just tied a knot in it, love. Now, the surplus fabric, remember that? I just ripped it. I ripped it into lengths, and then I took the lengths and tied some bows onto the chairs. The not-to-be-used tea towel, or as one lovely viewer called it, the show towel. So that was my Christmas table 2024. No idea what my Christmas table 2025 is going to be, but I have a myriad of ideas whirling around my brain right now. So please join me next episode when 2025 Christmas is starting. Thank you for your company. Take care and happy decorating.